Teller destroys. Check from Black Billionaire. Then the feds burst through the doors. The sharp whir of the shredder tore through the afternoon hum of Patriot Bank's Midtown branch, louder than any alarm. It sliced through Julian Maddox's composure as easily as it did his check. A federal treasury refund for $1.2 million, gone in seconds. Amber Whitaker, the young teller behind the counter, didn't even flinch. Her eyes stayed locked on the machine, as if that sound, the sound of betrayal, was just another part of her routine. "Ma'am," Julian said slowly, his voice smooth but laced with disbelief. "You just shredded a government-issued treasury check." "You didn't even verify it." Amber tilted her head slightly, pushing her glasses up her nose. "It didn't look right. Paper felt off." Routing numbers were unusual. "That check was printed by the Department of the Treasury," he said, jaw tight. "And I gave you 2 forms of ID. "Yeah, well, things don't always add up, mister." Her tone was cold, condescending. She didn't know who he was, and Julian wasn't about to tell her. Not yet. Around them, the line had frozen. Phones hovered mid-air, recording. Whispers filled the marble-floored lobby like wind slipping under a cracked door. Julian stepped back, slowly. His eyes didn't leave hers. This isn't over. 3 hours earlier, Julian Maddox had stood in his study at the edge of Buckhead, the heart of old money Atlanta. The light filtering through his floor-to-ceiling windows painted golden streaks across shelves of books and war medals. His home was understated, by billionaire standards anyway. His assistant Noel had offered to handle the banking errand, but Julian had insisted on going himself. "I need to see it for myself," he said. "You're sure?" she asked. "It's a refund check from the Treasury. That amount—" "I know," he replied. "That's exactly why. The check wasn't personal income. It was a refund issued to his veteran non-profit, Operation Resolve, following a multi-year overpayment error flagged by a quiet audit. But Julian's name was still on it, because he'd floated the debt from his personal account to keep the Foundation's programs running during the pandemic. He threw on a brown leather jacket and jeans. No bodyguards, no Bentley, no tailored suits. Just a man walking into a bank, and that was the test. He wanted to see how the system treated a regular-looking black man walking in with a government check worth over $1 million. Inside the Midtown branch, the line wasn't long, but it moved slowly. Customers shifted impatiently as they filled deposit slips and tapped their phones. At the counter, Amber barely looked up when Julian stepped forward. "Deposit or withdrawal?" "Deposit," he said, pulling out the check and his ID. She glanced down, squinted, then frowned. She ran a UV light over the check, flipped it, frowned again. "This is... you?" she asked. "Yes," Julian said. "Julian Maddox. Veteran, CEO of Operation Resolve." Amber turned to her monitor, typing furiously. After a beat, she spoke without looking up. "I'm flagging this. It doesn't match our usual patterns." Julian felt a shift, the way her posture stiffened, the way her voice turned clipped. "I've deposited larger checks before," he said calmly. "Is there a supervisor you can call to verify?" Amber didn't respond. She grabbed the check, walked over to a shredder behind the counter, and fed it through. "No!" Julian barked, stepping forward. "What the hell are you doing?" "Sir, I have the authority to destroy potentially fraudulent instruments," Amber replied flatly. "This one triggered too many red flags." "That was a federal treasury refund check," Julian said through clenched teeth. "You just destroyed government property." She shrugged. "I followed protocol." It was then the murmurs started. A man near the door pulled out his phone and hit record. A woman whispered to her partner, eyes wide. Julian turned and walked to the middle of the lobby. He looked around. Everyone was watching now. "My name is Julian Maddox," he announced clearly. That was a legitimate treasury check. This bank just destroyed a refund issued by the US government to a veterans organization. "And I've got every second of it recorded." He held up his phone. Red dot blinking. Amber's face paled. She didn't move. Craig Landry, the branch manager, finally emerged from his office at the rear of the bank. "What's going on here?" he asked, eyes scanning the lobby. "She shredded my check," Julian said before Amber could speak. "A treasury check, without verification." "After I provided ID." Craig hesitated, then looked to Amber. "I followed security protocol," she said quickly. "It didn't feel right." Routing numbers were strange and the paper felt fake. Craig nodded slowly. "Sir, if you have an issue with a teller's actions, you can file a dispute with our compliance department, but I support my team. We're protecting the bank and its customers." "By destroying a treasury instrument?" Julian asked, voice icy. Craig didn't answer. He turned back to his office. Julian stood in silence, letting the weight of the moment stretch. He looked down at his phone, then stepped out of the building. Outside, Julian took a long breath. He dialed a number he rarely used. After 2 rings, a gravel-toned voice picked up. "Yeah? It's Maddox." "I need a favor." "Julian, what's up?" "I just watched a teller shred a federal check. I need a full audit." "And I want Treasury agents there before sunrise." A pause. "You got it. You need it loud or quiet?" Julian looked back through the glass doors of the bank. Amber was still at the counter. Craig was nowhere in sight. "Loud!" Across town, in a secure federal building, a printer started running. 2 badges were removed from a locked cabinet. By 6:45 the next morning, a black Suburban would roll up to the front of Patriot Bank. But none of that had happened yet. For now, Julian Maddox sat on a bench across from the bank. He opened his phone and started typing a message to Noel. "We may need the press." Quietly. "I want this to unfold just right." He stared at the bank doors. Let them laugh now. They wouldn't be laughing long. Julian didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, still in the same jacket he wore to the bank, fingers steepled as his phone buzzed again with yet another missed call from a news outlet. Somehow the footage had leaked within hours. Amber's cold stare, the mechanical hum of the shredder, Julian's quiet fury. By midnight, the video had already hit 6 figures in views. By 3 a.m., a few select federal offices had their hands on it. But Julian wasn't interested in going viral. He was interested in results. At 6:08 a.m. sharp, his private line rang. He answered on the first buzz. "This is Maddox." "Sir," said a crisp voice. "Special Agent Patrice Ward, Treasury Inspector General's office. I've been briefed. Are you still requesting field presence?" Julian rose from his chair and walked to the window. The street was quiet, only the hum of a garbage truck in the distance. "Absolutely." "And make sure the OCC is looped in." "They already are," she said. "We've dispatched a mobile compliance unit. They'll be at Patriot Bank in 30 minutes. Do you wish to be there?" "Oh," Julian said, a rare smirk forming. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." 32 minutes later, 2 unmarked SUVs rolled up to the Midtown branch just as the bank opened for the day. Inside, Amber was adjusting her headset behind the teller window. Her movements were robotic, still shaken from yesterday's confrontation. The lobby was mostly empty, except for an older man filling out a withdrawal slip and a barista in scrubs waiting in line with a coffee carrier. She didn't see Julian walk in. He stood back, near the potted plant by the entrance, watching. Craig Landry, the branch manager, emerged from his office with a clipboard in hand, preparing for the morning briefing. Then the doors swung open again. 4 agents stepped in, black suits, no nonsense. Their badges flashed in the lobby light. "Patriot Bank, Midtown Branch," Agent Ward said. Craig blinked. "Yes? I'm Special Agent Ward, Treasury OIG. This is Agent Rivas, OCC Compliance Division. We are conducting an immediate regulatory audit and investigation into the alleged destruction of a federal financial instrument that took place yesterday." Amber froze. Craig stiffened. "I see," Craig said slowly. "Can we step into my office?" "No," Ward replied. "This will be conducted transparently. We're requesting all surveillance footage, transaction logs and teller input reports from yesterday between 2:00 p.m. and 3:00 p.m. We'll also be questioning staff individually." The tension in the room dropped like a sledgehammer. Even the barista backed away from the counter. Amber's lips parted, her voice a whisper. "I thought it was fake," she said, almost involuntarily. "I was trying to protect the bank." "Not another word," Craig snapped. "Amber, go to the break room." But Agent Ward raised a hand. "Actually, Ms. Whitaker, we'd like to begin with you." Amber swallowed hard. Julian stepped forward from the shadows. The agents noticed him instantly but said nothing. Ward offered a slight nod, recognition without acknowledgement. Amber's eyes widened when she saw him. Color drained from her face. "You," she whispered. "You remember me," Julian said calmly. Craig spun toward him. "Mr. Maddox, this is a private investigation." "You're not permitted on the premises while—" "Actually," Agent Rivas interrupted, "Mr. Maddox has been invited to observe. This investigation was initiated through his direct contact with the Undersecretary of Domestic Finance." Craig's mouth fell open, words caught in his throat. Amber turned to Julian, voice trembling. "I didn't know who you were." Julian stepped closer, voice quiet but firm. "That's the problem." "You didn't need to know. You should have followed protocol, verified." "Called for backup. Instead, you made a judgment call based on your gut." Craig tried again. "We followed policy." "No," Agent Ward cut in. "You shredded a valid check without verification. That's destruction of government property. That's not just poor judgment. That's a federal offense." The room went silent. Julian watched Amber's eyes glisten, her jaw trembling. "I wasn't trying to be racist," she murmured. "I just thought something was off. The check was huge. It didn't fit." Julian's voice, calm and controlled, filled the room. "And because I'm black and dressed like someone without money, it couldn't possibly be real. That's what didn't fit? You don't get to make that call." The older man near the ATM muttered, "Damn right," under his breath. Craig turned a deeper shade of red. Agent Rivas pulled out a folder and handed it to Craig. "Mr. Landry, you are being placed on administrative leave pending full audit review. Your systems show a repeated pattern of inconsistent check processing, particularly toward high-value instruments from minority account holders." Craig opened his mouth, then closed it again. Agent Ward turned to Amber. "You will be suspended immediately pending investigation. Do not attempt to access any Patriot Bank systems until we contact you. Your actions are under review for potential criminal liability." Amber looked at Julian, eyes pleading. "I'm sorry." "I really didn't mean—" But Julian didn't flinch. Intent doesn't undo damage. An hour later, the bank was in chaos. News vans had begun to circle. Word had spread. Julian stood outside on the steps, hands in his jacket pockets. Noelle pulled up in his Escalade and handed him a phone. "Harrison," she said. He took it. "Mr. "Maddox," said the warm voice of the Undersecretary. I've just been briefed. Everything's moving. Treasury's escalating the internal alerts. That branch will undergo full compliance review. And your check? It better not still be confetti. Harrison chuckled. Already reissued. Funds are wired directly. In your foundation's account now. Julian exhaled. Good, he said. But I want public accountability. I'm not here just for my money. You'll get it, Harrison said. There's already interest in committee hearings on discriminatory practices in private banking. You might be asked to testify. I'll be there. Julian ended the call and looked up at the news cameras beginning to flicker with life. This wasn't just a personal battle anymore. It was national, and it had only just begun. The next morning, the front page of the New York Sentinel featured a still image of Amber Whitaker's stunned face as federal agents led her out of Patriot Bank's Midtown branch. The headline read, "Bank Teller Shreds Billionaire's Check. Federal Agents Raid Branch in Stunning Turn." Across the city, conversations buzzed in cafes, boardrooms, and street corners, but none louder than the whispers inside the sleek headquarters of Maddox Global Ventures. In a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor, Julian Maddox stood before a dozen of his senior staff, his reflection mirrored in the polished surface of the conference table. His usually calm demeanor was replaced with the kind of focused intensity only those closest to him had seen before. "Are we sure the media's only got the surface?" he asked. Rayner, his communications director, nodded. "For now. They know you're wealthy, they know the check was legitimate, and they know Patriot Bank is under investigation. But they don't know about the Blackwood Initiative." Julian glanced down at the thick folder in his hand, documents tied to one of his most important upcoming projects, a multi-billion-dollar education trust meant to help underserved youth across the country. The shredded check was the first major transfer to fund it. "They don't need to know about that, not yet," he said. "But we do need to control the narrative. This isn't just about a check anymore. It's about the way the system treats people who look like us, no matter how much we've built." He turned to his lead attorney, Darius Glenn. "Where are we on legal options?" Darius leaned forward. "Amber's suspension is now official, but the federal agencies are also looking into Patriot Bank's pattern of behavior. More specifically, how many high-value checks from black and brown customers have been flagged or rejected. If we dig, I guarantee this wasn't a one-off." Julian's jaw tightened. "Then start digging." Back at the Midtown branch, a replacement team had been brought in, corporate compliance officers, PR handlers, and temporary tellers from neighboring districts. A large paper sign taped to the glass door read, "This branch is under review. Limited services available." Inside, Craig Landry sat in his cleared-out office, his personal effects already boxed. But he hadn't gone quietly. On a private call in the back room, Craig hissed into the phone. "I need this contained." "Now!" a voice crackled through the line. "You should have handled it better." "I didn't know he was Julian Maddox," Craig barked. "He looked like some veteran in a hoodie." No entourage, no PR team, no drivers. He walked in like a regular customer. The voice on the other end paused. That was the point. Craig blinked. "What?" "Word is, Maddox went in undercover. Deliberately. He's been testing banks for bias, and now you just gave him the perfect case." Craig's face went pale. Elsewhere in Manhattan, Julian made his way through the crowd at the 92nd Street Y, where he was scheduled to speak at a private fundraiser. As he reached the back entrance, a wiry young man intercepted him. "Mr. Maddox, you don't know me, but my name is Luis Romero. I saw what happened. I used to bank at Patriot." "They held my check for 10 days last month, said it had to be verified because I looked too young for that kind of money. It was only $8,000. I almost lost my lease." Julian paused, sizing him up. "Did Did you file a complaint? Luis laughed bitterly. To who? Their manager was the one who did it.
Said it was policy. Julian looked over his shoulder, then pulled a card from his wallet. My office. Monday morning.
Bring documents. Luis stared at the card like it was a golden ticket. Seriously? Julian nodded. We're not just fixing my situation. We're fixing the system. That night, Julian sat alone in his townhouse in Harlem. The TV was off, the lights low. He scrolled through emails on his phone until one caught his eye. Subject: discreet inquiry regarding Patriot Bank. He opened it. The message was short. A whistleblower from inside Patriot Bank's corporate legal team. It read, "There's a pattern. Maddox's check wasn't the first destroyed, just the first caught on camera. I can prove it. Meet me in person." Attached was a spreadsheet. Julian clicked it open. Dozens of entries. High-dollar checks. Delayed. Flagged. Voided. The common denominator? Every name was either Latino, Asian, or Black. Julian exhaled sharply, anger creeping into his veins. This wasn't about him anymore. It was systemic. He tapped the contact number, waited. A woman answered on the first ring. "I didn't send that for publicity," she said quickly. "I sent it because I couldn't take it anymore." "Then we need to meet," Julian said. "And if what you're saying is true, I'll make sure the whole damn country knows." There was a pause. "Tomorrow. Bryant Park." The reading room. Noon. Julian ended the call, set the phone down, and stared out the window at the city that had made him a billionaire, and now reminded him, all over again, what he was still fighting for. This wasn't about proving his wealth. It was about proving the worth of every person who'd ever been dismissed, ignored, or profiled. He'd walked into Patriot Bank as a man. They had shredded his check. But now, he was coming back with an army. The winter sun barely cut through the glass walls of the Bryant Park reading room as Julian sat alone at a wooden table, his coat collar turned up and a knit beanie pulled low. Around him, tourists sipped overpriced coffee, and office workers scrolled their phones, unaware that one of the wealthiest black men in America sat quietly in their midst, waiting. At exactly noon, a woman approached. Late 30s, blazer beneath her coat, glasses that didn't hide the deep worry in her eyes. She hesitated before sitting. "You Julian Maddox?" she asked, her voice low, cautious. He nodded. "You're the whistleblower." She offered her hand. "Carmen DeSoto, legal compliance at Patriot Bank's Northeast region, until yesterday." Julian raised an eyebrow. "You got fired?" She shook her head. "I resigned, before they could pin this mess on me." "But I saw too much." He leaned in. "Tell me." She opened her laptop and turned it toward him. Over the last 2 years, 63 Treasury and government-issued checks flagged for suspicious activity. 47 of them belonged to black customers. 11 to Latinos, 3 Asian, 2 were white. In each case, no verification call was made. Protocol skipped. Julian's brow furrowed as he scanned the records. "You're saying they deliberately targeted minorities?" "I'm saying the pattern isn't random," she replied. "And Craig Landry knew. He signed off on internal memos suggesting staff remain vigilant with non-traditional clients. That's code, and you know it." Julian's fists clenched. Carmen continued. "I tried raising the issue 6 months ago. Was told to drop it." That it wasn't my place to interfere with branch-level discretion. He shook his head slowly. This wasn't about fraud prevention. It was prejudice dressed as policy. She nodded. "And now it's about damage control. They're shredding internal emails, pressuring junior staff to sign NDAs, offering quiet payoffs to shut people up. Julian looked at her hard. And why aren't you taking the money? Carmen hesitated. Because 2 months ago, my father, Vietnam vet, had his VA check lost at a branch in Jersey City. Same excuse, same treatment. He died last week. Never got to fix the car he was going to take to visit his grandkids. Silence fell like a curtain. Julian broke it gently. I'm sorry. You deserved better. So did he. Carmen's voice cracked. We all do. He nodded once, decisively. Then let's make sure this story doesn't disappear. That night, back in the Midtown branch, Craig Landry paced the nearly empty lobby, lit only by overhead fluorescents. Amber Whitaker had been replaced by a floating teller, and the phones rang less and less. His office door remained cracked open, blinds tilted just enough for him to monitor everything. He was on a call again. I don't care how much it costs, Bruce. We need this to die before regulators start pulling deposit data. A gruff voice on the other end replied, They already are, and your name's on the shredding orders. That's protocol. That's bank policy. Doesn't matter. Maddox has friends in the Treasury. That replacement check was processed in under 4 hours. You know how rare that is? They're treating him like a diplomat. Landry's voice trembled. I didn't know it was him. Then maybe you should have asked. Landry hung up without another word. He hadn't slept in 3 days. Meanwhile, Julian stood in front of a camera. It wasn't a press conference. It was a live stream. Behind him, a plain blue curtain. In front of him, millions of followers. I wasn't going to say anything, he began, voice measured. I didn't want this to be about me. But then I learned it wasn't just me. He paused. This isn't about one check being destroyed. This is about a system, a pattern. One that quietly robs dignity from people who've done nothing wrong. People who've worked, served, saved, and still get questioned. Still get profiled. Still get told, you don't belong here. He lifted the spreadsheet Carmen had given him. This is just the beginning. We are launching a class action suit. If you've been profiled, dismissed, denied financial services without cause, come forward. We have lawyers. We have media. We have reach. His eyes hardened. They counted on us staying silent. But we're not staying silent anymore. Within minutes, his hashtag, #shredded but not silent, began trending across platforms. The emails flooded in. Stories poured out. Mothers who had checks flagged while trying to pay tuition. Entrepreneurs denied business loans despite perfect credit. Veterans told their benefits were suspicious. It wasn't a drip. It was a flood. And Julian knew they had just struck the first real blow. Across town, Carmen received an anonymous text. They know you spoke to him. Be careful. She stared at it, heart pounding. But she didn't delete it. Instead, she screenshotted it and sent it directly to Julian. A moment later, his reply came. We've got your back now. No more shadows. And just like that, Carmen knew. The fire had already started. Now it was time to burn down the lies. The atmosphere inside Patriot Bank's Midtown headquarters had shifted from sleek professionalism to pure crisis containment. The once bustling open floor now buzzed with tension, whispered conversations, and faces buried deep behind glowing monitors. An unmarked black SUV idled outside the main entrance, its tinted windows concealing the presence of the federal agents watching every move inside. Craig Landry stood in the executive conference room, his nerves barely held together. He tugged at his collar and stared at the wall-mounted flat screen broadcasting the morning news. Julian Maddox's name was splashed across every channel now. It wasn't just a viral moment anymore. It was an organized movement. Lawsuits had been filed. Whistleblowers were speaking up. Carmen de Soto's name had leaked, and a few other insiders were rumored to be cooperating with investigators. "This is getting out of hand," Craig muttered. Across from him sat Melissa Hardwick, the bank's chief legal officer, tapping her pen against a legal pad. "You should have told us exactly what happened the minute you destroyed that check, Craig." "I didn't destroy it," Craig snapped. "It was Amber. She was your hire. Your supervision. Your responsibility." Craig slammed his hand on the table. "She didn't know who he was." Melissa didn't flinch. "That's the point." Just then the door opened, and Roger Kim, head of risk compliance, stepped in with a file in hand. "You both need to see this." He tossed the file on the table. Inside were a series of emails and internal memos, all digitally stamped, all damning. Craig scanned the contents, face draining. "These are restricted threads. How did—" Roger cut him off. "The Department of the Treasury has already subpoenaed our internal comms. Carmen wasn't the only one who kept receipts." Melissa folded her arms. "There's an agent from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency downstairs right now. They're going to comb every single flagged check for the last 2 years. We're officially under federal investigation." Craig's jaw clenched. "So what do we do?" "We mitigate," Melissa replied coldly. "You're taking a leave of absence, effective immediately." He stared at her. "You're scapegoating me." "You gave them the rope," she replied. "We're just letting you hang." Meanwhile, at a cafe in Harlem, Julian sat across from Congressman Elijah Brooks, a longtime civil rights advocate with sharp eyes and a voice that carried the weight of generations. "You didn't come to me for political clout, did you?" Brooks asked. Julian shook his head. "I came because this is bigger than me. I need support to push legislation that'll make this kind of discrimination a federal offense, with teeth." Brooks leaned forward. "You have my attention. But you're going to make enemies." "I already have," Julian said. "But the truth doesn't care who it offends." The congressman smiled. "I'll sponsor the bill." "You'll have to testify when it's time." Julian nodded. "I'll be ready." That same day, a leak to the press changed everything. A confidential Patriot Bank document was posted online by an anonymous source. It outlined an internal policy, codenamed tear shielding, recommending tellers use discretion when dealing with high-dollar transactions from non-conventional appearance clients. The language was vague, but the intent was unmistakable. Systemic racial profiling disguised as procedural caution. The internet exploded. News anchors called it digital redlining. Civil rights attorneys condemned it as modern-day Jim Crow in suits and ties. And thousands of Black, Latino, and immigrant customers came forward with eerily similar experiences. At a hastily assembled press conference outside Patriot Bank's headquarters, a spokesperson denied any wrongdoing. But they were drowned out by protesters chanting Julian's hashtag. Shredded but not. Silent. Back in her Brooklyn apartment, Carmen de Soto watched the live coverage with tears in her eyes. She never wanted the spotlight, but the truth was bigger than her fear. Her phone buzzed. "Julian." "They're coming for Craig," Carmen replied. "About time." Julian. "The press wants your side." Carmen hesitated. Then, "Let's tell it together." In a final twist that day, Craig Landry was escorted from the building by private security. His nameplate was pulled from his office door, his access revoked, his email terminated. He exited through the back entrance, head down, photographers flashing, but as he slid into a waiting car, he pulled out a burner phone and dialed. "They're turning on me," he whispered. "But I've got dirt, and if I go down, I'm taking others with me." On the other end, a cold voice replied, "Then maybe it's time you disappeared for a while." Click. And the line went dead. The sound of applause echoed across the packed community center in East Harlem. Julian stood under the harsh lights of the podium, cameras flashing, phones raised in the crowd. What began as a quiet act of defiance had ignited something unstoppable. The bank incident wasn't just his personal humiliation anymore. It had become a national conversation about financial discrimination. He took a breath, then spoke into the mic. We all know this isn't just about a check. It's about dignity, about walking into a room and being seen as less than because of the color of your skin. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I was trying to deposit a check from my own foundation. The room fell into a tense silence as his voice grew steady. And what they didn't know was, I'm not just a client, I own several financial institutions across the country. I sit on boards they only dream of accessing, but none of that mattered to them. Because in their eyes, I was just another black man walking in with money he couldn't possibly have earned. That moment hit like thunder. Gasps rippled through the room. The reveal of Julian's true identity and his power was no longer just rumor. After the event, Carmen caught up with Julian backstage. You ready for what comes next? She asked, folding her arms tightly. Julian looked at her, eyes calm but resolute. No. But I'm not running from it. Neither am I. Meanwhile, inside a cold beige room at the office of the Comptroller of the Currency, an emergency audit team pored over internal Patriot Bank files. One name kept surfacing: Garrett Wilkes. Wilkes was a retired executive who had quietly consulted on Patriot's outdated fraud prevention systems. He wasn't just a shadow figure, he had drafted the tier shielding language now at the center of the storm. What no one knew yet was that Wilkes also sat on the board of 3 regional banks and a lobbying group influencing finance regulations in D.C. Agent Lena Chen, leading the investigation, rubbed her temples as the new revelations surfaced. This runs deeper than we thought, she said. Her colleague, James Patel, tapped on his laptop. He's got ties to a dozen decision-makers. He's been influencing how risk assessments are built and who gets flagged for nearly 20 years. Lena's jaw clenched. We're not just dealing with a rogue teller or a bad policy. This is systemic manipulation. Back at Patriot Bank's headquarters, Melissa Hardwick sat frozen in her chair. A message from an unknown number had just popped onto her private phone. It was a video. Craig Landry. In a private meeting 3 months ago, laughing. If they're black and walking in with 6 figures, delay it. Call it a system flag, a discrepancy, anything. By the time they escalate, we'll have legal ready. Most of them won't push that far. Melissa's heart sank. She knew this wasn't just a PR disaster anymore. It was a criminal conspiracy. Later that night, Julian was invited to a national interview on a primetime news network. The anchor leaned forward, almost too curious. Mr. Maddox, you could have gone public the moment that teller destroyed your check. Why didn't you? Julian looked directly into the camera. Because this story isn't about me. It's about everyone they've done this to, who didn't have the means to fight back. I wanted to show how deep the rot goes. And to do that, I had to wait until they showed their full hand. The anchor nodded, stunned. And now? Julian paused. Now we clean house. The next morning, headlines screamed with updates. The Department of Justice had opened a formal investigation. Congressional hearings were scheduled. Julian Maddox had agreed to testify. And then came the biggest twist yet. Amber Ellis, the original teller who had shredded the check, posted a public statement on her social media. She wasn't hiding. I was following instructions. I was told clients like him were to be flagged and stalled. I did what I thought was part of protocol. I see now that I was wrong, but I wasn't acting alone. Attached to the statement was an internal memo from Craig Landry. Dated 2 months before the incident, In the memo, Craig used veiled language that encouraged tellers to exercise higher discretion with individuals from high-fraud demographic backgrounds, and warned that certain optics could reflect poorly but would be mitigated through legal compliance buffers. It was the smoking gun. Within hours, protests erupted again. But this time, there was more than outrage. There was momentum. There were names. There were documents. The mask had fully come off, and the people behind it were scrambling. Inside a private residence in Connecticut, Garrett Wilkes stared out his window, watching reporters gather on his lawn. He turned to his wife. "They always said the past would catch up to me. I just never thought it'd come through a check." She didn't say a word. The knock at the door was firm and sharp. It wasn't the press. It was the feds. The hearing room on Capitol Hill buzzed with tension. Every seat was filled, every camera was rolling, and every microphone was live. Julian Maddox sat calmly behind the long table, flanked by his legal counsel and representatives from his foundation. Dressed in a deep navy-tailored suit, he looked like he belonged there, because he did. But his presence wasn't about style or wealth. It was about truth. Across from him sat a panel of senators, each gripping the documents that had been made public over the past week. Amber Ellis's statement, Craig Landry's memo, and the damning list of flagged clients, disproportionately black and Latino. "Mr. Maddox," one senator said, clearing her throat, "thank you for being here. You've sparked a national reckoning. Let's start with this. Why did you let it go this far before revealing who you really were?" Julian leaned into the mic, his voice even. "Because if I'd told them I was a billionaire when that check was destroyed, they would have treated me like an exception. But I'm not the exception. I'm part of a long line of people who've been treated like they don't belong. And I needed the country to see that it could happen to anyone." The room fell silent. He continued, voice low but cutting. "This isn't about one bank or one teller. It's about a system that allows financial gatekeepers to weaponize discretion against people who look like me." As murmurs rose, Senator Linwood, known for his ties to Wall Street, tried to regain control. "But surely, Mr. Maddox, you understand that banks must protect themselves against fraud." Julian didn't flinch. "And when was the last time you heard about a white client having their check shredded at the counter without so much as a phone call?" Linwood looked down. The cameras caught it. Back at Patriot Bank's HQ, chaos reigned. Craig Landry's office had been raided. Executives whispered about subpoenas. HR was flooded with resignation emails. Melissa Hardwick had been placed on administrative leave, and interim managers were scrambling to rewrite public policy overnight. But the damage was done. News broke that Garrett Wilkes had flipped. In exchange for reduced charges, he had agreed to testify and had handed over decades' worth of internal documents implicating not just Patriot Bank, but 3 other institutions with similar targeting practices. The plot wasn't isolated. It was orchestrated. Amber Ellis sat in a coffee shop in Brooklyn, watching the hearing unfold on her phone. Her hand trembled as Julian spoke. She hadn't expected him to be so composed. So sharp. Carmen slid into the seat across from her. "Thought you'd be hiding." Amber blinked. "I was, until I realized hiding makes it worse." Carmen stirred her coffee, then leaned forward. "You messed up."
"But you stepped up. Don't expect applause. But at least now you're not part of their cover-up."
Amber nodded slowly. "I just didn't want to lose my job. I didn't realize how many people we were hurting." "You weren't just hurting them. You were helping protect the people who built this mess." Amber didn't argue. Meanwhile, in a hidden conference room of a federal building, agents reviewed a new wiretap. It was Craig Landry on a call with a known political donor. "They're going to drag my name through the mud. But they don't know what we still have. If we fall, We're taking a few congressmen with us. Agent Lena Chen hit pause and exchanged a glance with James Patel. We're not dealing with just corporate fraud anymore, James said. This is organized abuse of power, across sectors. Lena stood. Then we build a case big enough to bring the whole damn house down. Julian exited the Capitol building as reporters swarmed the steps. A young journalist shoved a mic toward him. Mr. Maddox.
With all this exposure, are you worried for your safety? Or your assets? He stopped and smiled faintly. No.
I'm worried for the people who still don't have a voice. I've got teams, lawyers, and cameras. Most folks don't. This fight was never just about me. From the top floor of a neighboring building, Garrett Wilkes watched the scene unfold. He looked older now, drained. The man who once brokered power in quiet boardrooms was now preparing to speak before the same committee.
His assistant knocked gently on the door. They confirmed your testimony for Monday. Wilkes sighed. Let's hope it counts for something. That night, Julian sat alone in his brownstone.
He flipped through an old leather-bound notebook, his father's. Inside were notes on financial equity, dreams of creating access for underprivileged communities, reminders that progress often comes at a cost. His phone buzzed. A text from Carmen. You ready to go national with this? We've got senators asking for policy reform. And networks calling for primetime interviews. He typed back. Let's talk tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to remember why we started. Outside, the city buzzed. But inside Julian's home, it was quiet. He had peeled back the layers, weathered the storm, and dragged a hidden system into the daylight. But the real fight, the one for lasting change, was just beginning. The courtroom was packed wall to wall, a palpable silence sitting heavy in the air. Reporters had shown up before dawn. College students stood in line for hours to witness it. Civil rights leaders, grassroots activists, and even CEOs watched from the gallery. At the front sat Julian Maddox, flanked by his legal team. To his left was a representative from the Department of Justice. To his right, a coalition of civil rights organizations, financial watchdog groups, and former clients who had been wronged. Faces that finally had names, stories, and now, a platform. And across the aisle sat Craig Landry, wearing a grey suit that looked just a bit too large now. Eyes hollow. Hands trembling. The judge called the court to order. Cameras clicked. Pens scratched. As of today, the judge announced, Patriot Bank is under federal oversight. Mr. Landry is charged with conspiracy to commit financial discrimination, obstruction of justice, and racketeering. This case will proceed to criminal trial. The room didn't erupt. It didn't need to.
The quiet gasp, the disbelief etched into Landry's face. It said more than applause ever could. But then came the twist. The DOJ representative stepped forward and handed the judge a sealed file.
Your Honor, we'd like to add one more name to the investigative docket, Senator Charles Linwood. The room exploded. Reporters jumped to their feet. Landry's jaw dropped. And up in the gallery, Carmen let out a low whistle. About time. Later that evening, Julian stood outside the courthouse. The sun dipped below the skyline, casting a warm gold over the steps. Amber Ellis approached him slowly, shoulders stiff. I watched your interview last night, she said quietly. Julian turned, waiting. I just wanted to say, I know sorry isn't enough, but I mean it. Julian nodded. I believe you. But the work doesn't stop with an apology. You saw what was happening. Next time, speak up before someone like me has to take the hit. I will. They shared a moment. One of tension, yes, but also change. Redemption wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it came in quiet acknowledgements. Inside a community hall in Newark, a town hall forum was in full swing. Julian stood at the front, no suit this time, just a plain button-down and jeans. The backdrop read, "Banking on Justice." He took the mic and smiled.
This isn't about me anymore. This is about how we take a broken system and make it accountable. It's about pushing for legislation that protects consumers, especially Black, Latino, and Indigenous customers, from discriminatory practices baked into financial policy. A woman stood up in the crowd.
"How can regular people like us help?" Julian pointed at her. "By showing up, by sharing your stories. By voting, by calling out injustice in your own communities, even when it's uncomfortable." Applause erupted, and this time, it was real. Back at Patriot Bank, the walls were bare. Most of the senior staff had either resigned or been removed. The new interim CEO, a woman of color with decades of experience in community lending, released a statement. "We failed, not just in practice but in principle. That changes today." The bank's diversity hiring policy was overhauled. Internal complaint systems were made transparent, and the board approved a $100 million restitution fund for affected customers to be distributed under independent review. But for Julian, the true victory wasn't the money. It was the ripple. Carmen leaned over Julian's laptop later that week as they reviewed footage from a speaking tour. "CBS wants a sit-down. But NPR offered an 8-part podcast deal about the case. You want legacy or reach?" Julian laughed. "Both." "Let's take the podcast. Stories stick better when people can hear the heartbeat behind them." Carmen raised a brow. "That's poetic." "Who are you and what did you do with the guy who threatened to sue a bank with a post-it note?" Julian smirked. "Growth." The final scene. Julian returns to the same branch where it all began. It had been remodeled. Fresh paint, new staff. He walks to the counter and hands over a check. Not a test this time, just a deposit. The teller, a young man with dreadlocks and a name tag that read Terrence, smiled. "Mr. Maddox, it's an honor." Julian chuckled. It's just Julian today. He watched as Terrence handled the transaction with respect, efficiency, and a professionalism that said, things had changed. Maybe not everywhere, maybe not forever. But here? Today? Yes. Julian turned to leave. Outside, a teenage boy watched him with wide eyes. "Are you the guy who stood up to the banks?" Julian paused. "One of them, but I hope you're the next." What started with a torn check became a movement, a call for fairness, accountability, and courage in the face of systemic injustice. Julian Maddox didn't just win a fight, he lit a fuse. If this story moved you, challenged you, or inspired you, help us keep telling the ones that matter. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Justice isn't just a courtroom word, it's a conversation we have together.